Hello, welcome to the channel. So this is your AWS beginner's guide. Imagine a situation, you got your new job, you never touched any cloud provider before like Google or AWS, but your new company decides to deploy everything into AWS. So you got your first day at work, you get your accesses, you log into your AWS account, you click on the list of services and you see this. Like a huge list of services available inside the AWS console. Most of them have quite weird names. So how are you supposed to know that EC2 stands for like a virtual machine, or what is S3 or all other stuff? So to navigate through this AWS jungle, I prepared this guide for you. We will focus on services that are most commonly used in day-to-day job. We'll ignore the rest. And also, just to be clear from the beginning, it's not supposed to be a tutorial of or in-depth overview of all of these services. We'll just mention what is used and which areas those services are covering. So that's the idea of the guide. Let's get started. So the first section, first thing to cover is VPC and networking. Straight away, a good thing is if you're joining a company that's already running their things on AWS, most likely you won't have to touch that, and VPC and networking is already configured somehow. But still, when you get more familiar with overall AWS infrastructure, I highly recommend just set up your own account and go through all these steps, create your own VPC, create your subnets, configure different things like that. It will give you a lot of knowledge that you'll probably need at some point during your software career. But again, don't waste too much time on that straight away. There are more important things to look into AWS. Just to recap, VPC is your virtual private cloud inside public cloud, and then you can create subnets inside your VPC, and if later you need to spin virtual machines or databases, you can pick one of those subnets and place your resources there. So the next thing on the list is EC2, and probably that's where AWS started many years ago. So basically that's the way how you can spin your box, your virtual machine, your server in AWS. Most likely it will be some type of Linux server, but there are different options available. And then you pick up your instance type, like how much CPU and memory you want. You click spin, and then you have access to your Linux server, where you can log in with SSH, install tools, run applications, or whatever you want to do with a machine. Nowadays, I don't see a lot of usages of plain EC2s. Most common use of EC2 is to create an infrastructure for other services. But still, you definitely need to know what is EC2 and how to use it. By the way, EC2 stands for Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud. So this, so it's like ECC, and they just enjoy naming things with two C letters as C2, and that's why this is called like that. It's hard to imagine nowadays that if you run something in production, you somehow do it without containers. So Docker is available for a long time. There was a huge hype around Kubernetes in recent years, and it's crucial to understand how to run Docker containers in AWS. If your company is not fully serverless, you will see some way of running containers to run your services. And in the AWS, there are two main options. And let's start with the bigger one, which is EKS. And EKS stands for Amazon Elastic Kubernetes Service. And that's basically the way to run a managed Kubernetes cluster. And on top of that, you can deploy your things as you would do into your normal Kubernetes cluster, self-hosted. But now you don't have to have a team that manage the cluster itself. Quite powerful option if you're into Kubernetes. That's definitely worth looking into. But to my personal taste, for most of microservices or whatever you want to deploy in AWS, for things that are stateless, so don't have persistent storage, there is a much easier option, and you can avoid Kubernetes entirely. And this is ECS, which stands for Elastic Container Service. It has a simpler API, and the most importantly, you can use your just Terraform, AWS Terraform provider to define your entire services as the Terraform configuration. There's a simple format, basically a JSON format to describe your container definitions, and then you can deploy that. Terraform apply basically will mean you do deployment of your service, and then you have your containers running. So there are two options, and it's valid for both EKS and ECS, how you can deploy your things. And one is based on EC2s, which we covered before. So the infrastructure of your Kubernetes cluster or ECS cluster will be a group of EC2 instances. And that will be your compute power backed by the cluster will be backed by these two EC2 instances. The other thing is serverless. Of course, like there is not true serverless, it's still servers, but they are managed by AWS now, and it's called Fargate. It's again available in EKS and ECS. In that case, you just say you want this amount of CPU and memory. They're like predefined combinations of CPU and memory pairs. So let's say you want one CPU and 2 gigabytes of RAM, and AWS will provision you with these resources and run your containers on this Fargate instance. So on top of your ECS deployment, you'll probably need some kind of load balancer. And there are two options in AWS, which is ALB and NLB, different types of load balancers working on different levels. So network load balancer is more low level. ALB is application load balancer, which is a bit high level. If you create your ECS service with multiple instances, you want to load the traffic between these instances, and in that case, you'll create a load balancer in front of your ECS service, so they get the portion of the traffic. Of course, it's not only related to ECS. There are other types of usages of load balancers. Keep in mind that if you see something like ALB and NLB, that stands for different types of load balancers. Next, we have S3, which probably the most popular and well-known service or available, and it's a simple storage service. Again, same naming as we saw in EC2. We have SSS here, and it's S3. It's really simple to explain. It's just like a place where you can store your objects, files, and other type of data. You create, which is called S3 bucket, a named place where you can put your things, and then you basically have something like you have on your local machine, a nested tree where you can put your different objects, and you can access them from other types of AWS services. Moving next, we have databases, and it's really hard to imagine that in your system you avoid database entirely. So at some point you'll need some kind of database, and there's two options here. Two main options is to go more traditional relational database, or go with NoSQL database. And both is available in AWS. So for relational database, you will have your relational database service. It's called RDS. And you basically can pick an engine that you want. It could be Postgres, MySQL. Probably, I think Oracle is also supported, and all some other types. But I mostly use Postgres. The other thing is worth mentioning is Aurora, which is kind of same as RDS, but it has a bit more features. It has high availability, and you also have options to easily scale it up and down. So yeah, that's regarding relational databases. If you're more interested in NoSQL databases, probably the most popular option is DynamoDB, which AWS own NoSQL database. You'll have your tables created straight in your account in DynamoDB section, and then you can work with them as with NoSQL database. If you prefer Cassandra, there is a managed solution for that called Amazon Key Spaces, but literally it's a managed Cassandra inside AWS. So next group of services to cover is related to messaging and queues. There are different options available, and it is a bit out of scope to discuss here different application of those tools, but still worth mentioning. If you see something like SQS, you will know that it stands for Simple Queue Service, and it's a way to create a queue so your microservices can exchange messages. The other option, more related to data streaming and maybe some analytics and all that stuff, is called Kinesis. But it's similar, but you have like this is some middle ground between a simple queue and something like Kafka. And the next thing is obviously Kafka itself. And there are ways to self-host Kafka on AWS, but there is also a managed solution called MSK. And yeah, you can basically create your entire Kafka cluster inside AWS, and the brokers will be managed by AWS. So you don't have this additional workload of managing your own Kafka cluster. Next section is serverless features, and the most popular option here is AWS Lambda. You can create your serverless functions with this service, and there is a list of runtimes that's available. And there's like Node.js, Python, Java, and other runtimes available. And you can have multiple options here as well. You can build your Lambdas as Docker images, or you can just use your code files and upload them to S3 or to Lambda directly, and Lambda will read that source files and run your functions. I've never been a heavy user of AWS Lambdas, but I know some companies prefer to be like true serverless and use Lambdas quite extensively. So it depends on your company. But anyway, in any company, I've seen one or two Lambdas at least for different small things. And a couple more services to cover. Just some random things that I used to work over the last couple of years. I was a data engineer for 2 years, and we're working with analytics quite a lot, building a data lake, and one of their key services was Athena, which is like a query engine. And for example, you can use your S3 to use your S3 as a persistent storage, and then on top of your S3 bucket, you can build Athena tables, and Athena tables will basically provide you with interface to query the data. It is like a SQL query engine. And related to Athena, there is a service called AWS Glue to manage your schemas inside that S3 bucket and do some transformations. So not everyone will touch these services, but yeah, worth mentioning. And the final one I want to mention is AWS Costs Explorer. It's really important, especially if you're doing it in your own account. Just pay really close attention to this section, just to keep your costs as low as possible. And of course, if you work in the company, it's usually a good idea to go there and check how your AWS account is doing in terms of costs, because sometimes you can notice something, and probably sometimes it's a quite easy fix to reduce costs if you want to take them under control, and people will just say thank you for that. And that's the end of my short AWS guide for beginners. Hopefully that was useful, and I hope that will save you some headache in case you're just starting with AWS and you now know where to look into and what to pay attention to. Thanks a lot. Just a reminder that I also have a blog on the Substack, and I already published this information there. So if you prefer text version, just follow the link in the description and subscribe. And also there are links to Buy Me a Coffee and Coffee pages where you can support my work. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next video. Bye bye.